and let's get started. Today, we are presenting our webinar on Web3, brand security and asset management. And we are very excited to have a few leading industry experts with us today. We have Igor Teslya. He is the Sales Director for North America and the European Union at MetaMask Institutional, and Jack Lee, responsible for institutional sales and business development at Bitgo, and Markmonitor's own Shane Layman, Manager of Global Industry Relations. And if you'll be in San Juan next week for ICANN 79, make sure to say hello while you're there. And with that, I will pass you off to Shane. You are all in very good hands.
Great. Thank you, Natalie, for the introduction. And again, thank you to Jack and Igor, who could be here to discuss all things Web3 and asset management. We're fortunate enough to be partnered with companies like Bitgo and MetaMask Consensus. So really excited to hear what they have to say. But before we do anything, let's go over the agenda today, so you know kind of where we're going with this. So to start it off, we'll talk about Web3 blockchain and Web2. We'll then move into brand assets on the blockchain. One of the big talking points will be around brand risk in Web3 and what you as a brand owner should be aware of. What Web3 custody looks like, qualified custody solutions, and then we'll have some presentations from Bitgo and MetaMask Institutional as well. Awesome. So let's talk Web3. What is it? Web3 is the new iteration of the internet, built on blockchain technologies. It's decentralized, so think of this as a difference to the traditional ICANN model, which is all centralization. This is the decentralized net. So you know, in the traditional sense, computers connect to central servers. They view and interact with content like websites, based on the domain name system, the DNS. And a blockchain is a digital database or ledger. This is what Web3 is built on, excuse me. So they're distributed among nodes of a peer-to-peer network. Can be thought of, you know, as a replacement to the Web2 central servers. And then data is grouped into blocks, chained together, each supporting the next block in there. We have a little comparison here for Web3 to Web versus Web2. So again, that decentralized nature, peer-to-peer networks versus centralized servers. There is no central authority, so no single point of failure. And in the Web3 space, users own their own data. We have a great little graphic here that from the start where the user requests or initiates the transaction. This is then permitted across different nodes or computer networks. These nodes then validate the transaction using their consensus mechanisms. Once confirmed by the majority of nodes, the new block of data is created and added to the blockchain. This makes it virtually impossible to alter or corrupt. Then the transaction is now recorded on the blockchain ledger and complete. Now let's talk about brand risk in Web3. This is one of the biggest issues that kind of exists in the space for rights holders, just in general. And the biggest issue is that there are no rights protection mechanisms yet. This is all going to be decided at the registry level or Web3 marketplace. That being, some of the major players in the space, Unstoppable Domains, the Ethereum name service, Handshake Domains. They actually decide what course of rights protection is allowed. There are some registries that are exploring cease and desist notices. Those would be sent from a central authority to the owner of the NFT domain name's wallet address. However, there's no formally adopted RPMs, rights protection mechanisms, or recourse available in Web3 currently. So why does that matter? Why should you care, right? So what we advise our clients on is to minimize and mitigate the risk as much as you can by proactively claiming your brand name in the space. I know it's kind of hard to predict the future about what's going to happen in the Web3 space if your consumer base is only going to be Web3 native in 5 years or not, but at least you have that asset claimed. In some marketplaces, registries, you have, really just one shot at registering this, or you have to acquired through an acquisition or other forms of acquiring the domain name after it's been minted to the blockchain. One thing to note is that not all Web3 marketplaces are created equal. We say that plenty of times. What that means basically is that there are only certain marketplaces and registries that Markmonitor is going to interact with. We have a vast experience in vetting these vendors in order to decide which ones we want to, offer to our clients, if that makes sense. And so what we do is know your customer, know your provider type actions, but also doing the research on that end. So basically what that breaks down to sum it up, is that you need to know who you're interacting with. If it's, someone in a suit jacket in their basement that is offering out second level domain registrations to anyone that wants to mint these, or if it's actually a trusted entity. And then again, to sum it up, knowledge is power. We have this great glossary of terms that is downloadable in the handout section of GoToWebinar. Familiarize yourself with these terms. I can't stress enough that there are some comparisons between domain management in Web3 and domain management in Web2 that you will kind of see these themes that pop up, but also there's going to be new terms: minting, mining, claiming, custody. Familiarize yourself with these terms so that you're able to better be informed when making these decisions. And with that, I believe I turn it over to Jack Lee from Bitgo, who will give you a little discussion on the gateway to Web3. Take it away, Jack.
Thank you, Shane. And first and foremost, I want to reiterate a thank you to the Markmonitor team for putting together the presentation and the webinar here today, and MetaMask Institutional for joining us as well. So a couple of words and themes you're going to hear me touch on in this presentation. So safety and security, trust, compliance, insurance. And if there's one thing that I want you guys to take away from this discussion on the Bitgo side, it's that we're a veteran in the blockchain infrastructure and custody space, and we want to enable our clients and our partners to make the Web 2 to Web 3 transition in a safe, compliant manner, whether that's buying Bitcoin, holding NFT domain names, or tokenized real world assets. We want to make that a smooth process for you. And with that, we can jump to the next slide. So who is Bitgo? Where do we come from? Where do we sit in the space? We've been around for over a decade. And our co-founder, CEO, Mike Belchi, is a good example of really the Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3 transition. So was an early employee at Netscape Navigator. From there, moved to Google, built out the Google Chrome engine that we know and use today. So that Web 2 use case. And in 2013, and playing around with the Bitcoin blockchain, really recognized that there was no true secure way to hold digital assets at the time. And so he pioneered this multi-signature wallet technology as an architecture to hold digital assets in a more secure manner. So that was back in 2013. And in preparation for institutional corporate enterprise adoption, we sought to become regulated. And we achieved that in 2018 with our South Dakota Trust Charter. So that made us the first purpose-built qualified custodian for digital assets, NFTs, crypto. And you'll see that we've since expanded this. So we have a number of regulated entities worldwide, not only here in the US, but in Europe and elsewhere. And on top of these regulated product offerings, we've built services more in the prime space, such as trading and financing. In a nutshell, though, Bitgo is the leader in digital asset security, custody, and liquidity, with 1,500 plus clients in more than 50 countries worldwide. And this is a list that includes other regulated entities, institutional investors, enterprise corporates, as well as platforms. So let's dive a little bit into who those clients are and what the segments look like on the next slide, please. So I won't go through all of the line items here, but to give you an idea, it's the institutional investor segment. So these are hedge funds, asset managers, VCs, and obviously top of mind today, ETF issuers with the spot Bitcoin ETFs here in the US. We work with the kind of builder side of the equations. This is more the B2B2C use case. So these are fintech neobanks, payment processors, exchanges, and some other examples there, as well as Fortune 50 brands, right? Working with them on NFT loyalty programs, domain brand management. So that's particularly relevant to our conversation here today. And even government agencies. So we work with these different client segments across custody, wallet infrastructure, NFTs, trading, financing. So everyone's a little bit different, and we're able to cast a wide net in part with our strong product offering, our regulatory compliance, as well as our global footprint. So why don't we jump to the next slide? And I think this is a good way to visualize the Bitgo product line and the services as well, in that the core and the foundation is really that regulated fiduciary custody. This includes $250 million of insurance coverage underwritten by Lloyd's of London. This is SOC 1 Type 2, SOC 2 Type 2 audited through Deloitte. And to go a little bit further on the qualified custody term, what does that really mean? We gained this approval back in 2018 after going through rigorous audits and standards that we had to meet, all in an effort to protect client funds against loss. So the term qualified custodian stems from the Investment Advisors Act of 1940. And to qualify as a QC, the entity must hold client funds in a segregated manner, meet rigorous regulatory standards, again, aimed at protecting client funds against loss, theft, or misuse. And it only applies to certain regulated entities. So this could be a state chartered trust, which is what Bitgo is. This could be a federally regulated bank. But the entity needs to operate with fiduciary duty to their clients. So some qualified custodians, such as Bitgo, we offer additional protections such as insurance, backup keys, customizable policies, permissions, and kind of operational controls. And this regulated offering that we built, it covers over 700 coins and tokens, covers NFTs, and even tokenized real world assets. On top of the regulatory compliance component, as mentioned, we have the wallet infrastructure, custody, NFT wallets, and some ancillary products such as trading, financing, and staking, which are really geared towards our institutional investors, helping them generate alpha, run their strategies, etc. And with that, we can go to the next slide and talk a little bit about the key security. So as mentioned, the Bitgo wallet infrastructure that our co-founder CEO pioneered with this multi-signature scheme, right? We don't need to go into too much detail on this, but I think it is important to speak to the safety and security of the underlying architecture here. So using the mailbox analogy, which I think is pretty useful. So think of with your mailbox, your mailing address is your public key in a Web3 world, and the private key is how you open the mailbox to access what's inside, right? So on the private key side, and this is where Bitgo specializes and the security therein, instead of having one private key, which is a single point of failure, the multi-signature scheme uses a 3-key system where 2 of 3 private keys need to come together to sign a transaction for it to be validated and confirmed. if you take a look in the top left, so that client key, to give you some insight on the procedures that we follow from a security standpoint, that client key is sharded up further, and those key shards are held on physical SD cards in safety deposit boxes in bank vaults with armed guards. So it's really the gold standard of digital asset NFT security. And again, with a track record of 10 plus years without any loss or theft, hacks of client assets, that's something we're really proud of. And these procedures help us to continue on that path. With that, we can jump to the next slide, please. So in addition to the private key security, we want to give our clients the ability to set up policies, permissions, risk environments, operational controls to meet their needs as a business. So what this means is at the user level, assigning different permissions. So perhaps you have a junior person on the team who you only want to be able to initiate withdrawals or transactions, and your chief operating officer who you want to have more of an administrator type role where they can initiate and approve. We have quorum based approval, so 2 of 3 users, 3 of 5, etc. View only access for finance, tax, audit is helpful, we find, and tax season's coming up, so I want to make sure that that plug is in there. And then on a per wallet, per transaction level, things like whitelists and setting limits either on a per transaction basis or over a given rolling period of time, so that if you don't want more than $500,000 or X amount of coins or tokens leaving a wallet, you can set that up, and you can get really custom here to meet the needs of your business and your team. And we can jump to the last slide for me, please. So I want to leave you guys with a good framework for evaluating digital asset custody, NFT, Web3 domain wallet providers. There is an attachment in the handouts list that speaks to some of these items as well. So, at the wallet security level, is there insurance offered? Are there backup keys? Are they SOC audited? Are there human procedures with the bank vaults and armed guards that complement the technology? Can you set up different policies and permissions to customize your kind of risk mitigation tactics? And then from a regulatory standpoint, are they a qualified custodian? Do they hold a fiduciary duty to me as a client? Do they hold funds in a segregated manner? And these are really valuable items, I think, to ensure that you're working with a trusted, safe, secure, and compliant partner as you make the transition from Web 2 to Web 3 for your own businesses, be it the NFT space, Web 3 brand domains, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. So a good framework to think about the space. And with that, I think I'm turning it over to Igor from the MetaMask team, one of our trusted partners. So thank you guys again for having me.
Great, thanks so much, Jack. Appreciate the introduction, and thank you so much for your comprehensive overview. For those of you who joined a little late, I'm Igor Teslya. I'm the sales director for MetaMask Institutional at Consensus. Before I begin my presentation, I'll do a quick level set of what the Ethereum blockchain is and how you might be interacting with it. Now, Ethereum is the first programmable blockchain that was launched in 2015. And the fundamental difference between this kind of network and the existing Web 2 infrastructure is, whereas in Web 2, the functionalities were really reading and writing, where you can read what's on the page and write to it. In Web 3, you also have ownership. So a lot of the assets that we're talking about, both from brand assets as well as monetary assets, are owned on something called wallets. And Jack Lee had a great metaphor for how wallets operate. Would you mind moving to the next slide, please? Thank you. So consensus has been around since the first Ethereum block was mined. It was founded by Joe Lubin, one of the co-founders of Ethereum. And we've had the fortune to partner with many of the biggest companies in the world, including JP Morgan, MasterCard, Microsoft. We've had thousands of clients globally where we've done tokenization projects, where we've led CBDC pilots for major banks, and where we've worked with some of the major NFT platforms. We're also responsible for managing and essentially maintaining MetaMask, which is the world's most used self-custodial crypto wallet. It's 35 million monthly users, and it is what gives essentially access to this Web3 space. Think of it as like the Google Chrome browser that you would use to access the internet. Aside from that, we run many of the validators or the nodes that operate the Ethereum blockchain. We are one of the top auditors in the blockchain space. We have an NFT platform called Phosphor, as well as running many of the access points within the Web3 space through Infura. And finally, we have our own layer 2, which is essentially a network on top of Ethereum, which has even greater security and even cheaper fees for use. Which we use to help scale this ecosystem further. Next slide, please, Natalie. So I want to talk a little about MetaMask Institutional and why it's important. We are the access point. We are the ones that provide a way for the custody that Bitgo is so well known for, to essentially be able to connect with the OpenSeas, the ENSs, and the unstoppable domains of the world. This essentially allows any asset that is securely custodied by Bitgo to now have the capacity to be deployed or to interact with many of these Web3 protocols. We are SOC 2 Type 1 certified. We're in the process of having our SOC 2 Type 2 certification, and we take security very seriously. As we are maintaining the self-custodial wallet for 35 million monthly users, we're pen tested by third-party auditors annually. And something that we discovered as we launched this wallet was many institutions wanted to get involved into Web3. And so we launched a version of MetaMask called MetaMask Institutional that integrated with the likes of Bitgo, one of our most popular and strongest custodians, as well as offering institutional portfolio monitoring tools, NFT tracking, reporting toolkits, and a host of other uses. And you'll see on the slide, it's mentioned that our NFT tracking system shows the average sales price, the booking prices, the floor prices, basically information about the assets that you're purchasing and holding. And it also allows you to report on this. So when auditors or accountants come in and want to understand what you're doing and what your books look like, you have a way to visualize all of this historic information across any blockchain and download it as a CSV, as well as access it via APIs. Would you mind, next slide, please? So I wanted to give a visual reference to some of the tools that I talked about. This is an example of our portfolio monitoring tool. And here you can see that assets are distributed across multiple sectors, and you can filter them by the different accounts. So this allows our partners like Markmonitor to easily and effectively manage the accounts of many, many different institutional partners and clients. Can you change to the next slide, please? For the NFT tracking, we have all of the NFT information organized into essentially bundles. So you have a whole series of NFTs for easy viewing. You have all of the analytics in place, as well as where the NFT came from. And move to the final slide, please, Natalie. Thank you. And so here you can see an example of our reporting tools. You'll see that there are transaction hashes, as well as the fees associated with each one of these purchases. This is important because you want to understand how much you paid for the asset and also how much you paid for using this network. Therefore, you can more effectively and precisely understand the profit and losses around all of these assets, and also how each of these transactions can be further specified with various notes, which chain it came from, which account it came from. All of this allows for a robust and institutional experience on DeFi that will eventually enable further growth in our Web3 space. And I believe that's the last slide. I will hand it over to Shane Layman.
Awesome, thanks Igor, and thank you both for everything. I think that was awesome. The first one we'll just go with, and Igor, Jack, I'll let you guys kind of bounce between the two who wants to answer. So what is the benefit of cold storage asset management?
Yeah, I can start with that one. So a couple of things. One is when we think about the private key material and how it's generated, how it's stored, right? In a hot wallet environment, which is online, right? That private key material might be encrypted and stored in your browser window, right? Or elsewhere. And then similarly with that type of setup, if you're using a self-custody solution, you may be required to take on the private key management security on your own. So, if you often hear the phrase, not your keys, not your crypto. So if you lose access to that private key, you could risk losing access to the assets in that wallet. So with the cold wallet setup, and to kind of take it a step further with the qualified custody setup, the private key material is generated and held offline. So if you think of from an attack vector surface area, right, versus being held in your browser, it's significantly less, right? It's going to be pretty hard to compromise the Bitgo trust bank vaults and key management practices with the again, the armed guard and safety deposit boxes, et cetera. So from a risk mitigation standpoint, would argue it's more secure. And then additionally, on the key management front, you're working with a fiduciary partner who is reviewed, audited, and regulated for their practices, procedures, et cetera, in managing and really securing private key material. So some of the items that I would consider and posit to answer the question.
Yeah, that's a really comprehensive answer. Just gonna give a big thumbs up to Jack Lee there. I think there are a lot of different types of ways to manage private keys now. And they've evolved over the last few years, where the distinction between hot wallets and cold wallets can be further distinguished with newer types of custody. You can break up the keys into smaller chunks, leave them digitally. You can have multiple cold wallets signed off together. And it's an exciting space because we're continually innovating on this. But yes, cold storage by its very definition is significantly more difficult to compromise.
Awesome, thank you both. Yeah, I think that's a great answer to that question. And then kind of building off that, there is the kind of thought that you want to keep everything in house, manage your assets yourself. So why is using a third-party custodian important, or why is that something that brands should adopt?
I can start with this one. Many of my conversations with clients revolve around understanding the custody landscape. While we work with Bitgo, we are the only multi-custodial platform in the world. So we have other custodians on our platform. And part of my conversations with clients is to understand what their needs are. Do they have investor needs or regulatory needs based on their jurisdiction to use a qualified custodian? Do they have the technical acumen in-house to manage these keys? How is their browser set up? How is their security set up? How many funds are being used? How many other users will be interacting with these keys? If it's just a single person, running your brand asset management shop, then perhaps a multi-signature scheme is not as necessary. Additionally, if you're headquartered in Europe versus the US versus China, or really anywhere in Asia, you may require a different level of custody, or you might require two different custodians, one for your operations in the US and one for your operations elsewhere. So it's a nuanced conversation, and oftentimes it really does take a few a few minutes of conversation to really get there. Jack, do you have any thoughts you'd want to add?
I think all good points. Nothing specific to add, but again, for some of the larger enterprise corporates, institutions entering the space, they'll have entities, they'll have offerings in the US, in Asia, in Europe, and there will exist different standards and different requirements in those regions. And so working either with one partner or multiple to meet the needs for those relevant onshore regulators is critical. So something to consider for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that sums it up really well. So building on kind of the Igor, you mentioned discussing with clients and whatnot, and I hope you guys can answer this question, with what you're allowed to say, but how are brands approaching their Web3 strategies? I mean, I can speak on some of the Markmonitor stuff that we're doing as well, and then I know this is kind of just for me, but can you share any names or like plans that you guys have discussed? Obviously, nothing that can be, nothing that's confidential, but some of the stuff that you've worked on, that you've been associated with, that's already live, that's out there.
Yeah, I can kick us off. So, our client base spans 50 plus countries, 1,500 plus names globally. In the Fortune 50 space, do the NFT rewards programs for one of the largest footwear, consumer brands globally. I'll let the audience members do a little bit of due diligence on who that is, but it's an exciting name for us to partner with. And look, I think the NFT loyalty reward space and not only that, but Web3 brand domain management is going to continue to proliferate and to be able to have a front row seat as an infrastructure layer to enable that is super exciting for us. So I think that's my initial thought on the topic.
Yeah, that's great. Sorry, Igor, just to touch on that, it's great to see, brands that have these forward-thinking projects in place, about the kind of the next wave of things that are going on, partnering with companies like the two of yours, to ensure that their assets are managed correctly, their projects are going through smoothly and stuff like that. Igor, to you.
Yeah, thank you. So oftentimes my conversations take one of two routes. One is, this consumer engagement route, where NFTs are a strategy for working with highly engaged consumer base, or to increase engagement by issuing these NFTs and sending them to wallets. So one example is MAC Cosmetics that we've worked with in the past. And then the other would be around managing the domains and being able to have those assets. Now, Markmonitor has done a tremendous job doing this on behalf of clients, and I think there's a little bit of friction where a certain amount of technical experience is necessary to do that. But we do have some folks coming to us. And then a third is there are more and more companies that are comfortable holding crypto assets on their books, in the case of Ethereum and certain stable coins. Or perhaps they want to accept crypto payments internationally. And so we oftentimes work with clients like that alongside a custodian, because we don't have money licensing capabilities. So you oftentimes need a custodian to do some of the on-off ramping and purchasing. But what we do offer are staking services. So if you're already holding Ethereum and you believe it's a good investment and you're holding it long term, then it's advantageous to put that Ethereum to work on the Ethereum network in order to secure the network and also to derive yield on that asset. So it's almost as if your treasury is able to make money without actually risking losing the asset because of the stability of the validator ecosystem. Again, I want to mention this is not investment advice. So just putting that out there. But yeah, those are the three conversations that I tend to have with some of the larger brands.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you for that. And then just to touch on Markmonitor's side of it, I think again it's a knowledge gain for our consumers or for our clients. Sorry. You mentioned, if they want to accept crypto payments for some forms, that they have a storefront, online storefront or something like that, and allowing consumers to pay in crypto. That's one example that we use. It's really, the possibilities are endless of where you want to take your brand. Jack, you mentioned the one that's doing the NFT loyalty program. I think that's an amazing example too of ways you can engage with a different consumer base. Yeah, awesome. So that's kind of all we had for questions. All the other questions we've kind of addressed as well with the answers that you guys had. So awesome. I would like to again thank everybody who was able to attend today. This was really informative. Awesome. If you guys want to learn more from the audience side, please reach out to your domain portfolio advisor. Go to markmonitor.com and hit the contact us page. Love to have chats with you. And then again, thank you to Jack and Igor for taking the time to jump on this. And we really value you guys' partnership and excited for the future. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.